What's the word on the street? Like who got the beats that be killing the game? Who's up on the screen? Who playing who? What's the score on the sheet? Fiso the Prince got him taking the seat. Got the legends giving us the 411. FisMaz from the 031. No hating sports and entertainment when we got it all and we the only ones. And after all that action, ever how we dripping high fashion. Drippy on some rich municipal stylists and soak up with passion. If it's giving us less, then we never settle. Make sure you pull up and bring all your medals. Sit back and relax, let's go. It's FisMaz bringing you the FisMaz Show. It's the FisMaz Show. It's the FisMaz Show. It's the FisMaz Show. It's the FisMaz Show.
What up, y'all? JP Doomin here, and you're listening to my main man on the FisMaz Show.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the FisMaz Show. Make some noise, people. Come on, man. Yeah, man. It's been a bit of a while. I've been so busy. It's been crazy, man. I decided to just press pause because, I said to myself, if I'm not going to give the show, the podcast, everything that I have, it's not fair on all of you who have supported me and who continue to support this great podcast. I was busy with the domestic cricket in December. Then it was the Betway SA20. I just needed some time off after that. It's been absolutely mental, but nonetheless, it is amazing to be back. And I thought the perfect show to come back with is, of course, a show about the Soweto derby. We all know that it's going down this weekend. I'm looking forward to it. I'm sure you are too. And we're going to be casting our minds back to some of our favorite derby memories. I'm going to be joined by Menzi Ngcobo, and of course, I'm going to be hearing from a few former players with regards to how they think the match will go. Yeah, it's going to be fascinating. But for me, from a career point of view, I'm obviously making a major transition from mainly working in cricket to moving across to football. Anyone who knows me knows how passionate I am about the game. Sometimes a little bit too much. And for me, it's an exciting time. I'm looking forward to what 2023 has to bring. And of course, I'm looking forward to engaging with all of you. I think we've got some really cool things that will be coming up. I'm just excited about the journey ahead. But, talking about South African football and what it brings to the table, I mean, it's crazy, when you really think about the dominance that we've had from Mamelodi Sundowns. If you cast your mind back to the 90s, to the early 2000s, you never would have thought that Kaizer Chiefs and Orlando Pirates would have, quote unquote, fallen off as much as they have. Some people may say I'm being harsh by saying that, but I mean it in a sense where who would have thought that Sundowns would, points-wise, and their performances in the African competitions, who would have thought that Sundowns would be just so far ahead? But kudos to them. There's obviously was a big debate a few weeks back with regards to that. One of the South African legends, Jabu Mahlangu, formerly known as Jabu Pule, of course, he spoke about the fact that Sundowns are killing South African football. I guess the challenge is there for all the other clubs to make sure that they pull up their socks and try and catch up. Orlando Pirates arguably have recruited pretty well, but perhaps it hasn't been as consistent as they would have liked in terms of results. So that will be one of the topics that we'll have today with regards to the battle between Atazwane in the dugout for Chiefs, as well as Jose Riviero in the Orlando Pirates dugout. So yeah, looking forward to those particular conversations. Menzi is standing by, so I don't want to keep him waiting for too long. Let me let him in and let's start the chat, because this is a massive game in South African football. It's a game where everything stands still. It's a game where people who aren't necessarily football lovers, they are fired up for it. So I'm interested to find out, not only from fans, in general, but also other people who tend to follow the show, who tend to follow the South African game, what their thoughts are. There he is, Menzi Ngcobo, looking smart and spiffy in a white shirt and a proper trim there. Yeah, how are you, brother?
I'm good, my brother. How are you doing?
Superb. I think our listeners have missed us a little bit. So I thought, it's derby week. It's time to get back on the saddle. I was just mentioning now that in my intro that it's just been such a busy time, and I just felt like trying to do the show in bits and pieces wasn't gonna quite work. Press pause, and I think we've come back at the right time. There's going to be so much going forward. I know a lot of people are saying the season is done and dusted. Sundowns have won the league, but still so many other talking points, surrounding the league itself, with coaching changes, relegation battles. and of course, who finishes in that top three. So, yeah, let's give Menzi Ngcobo a big round of applause. Come on now. What you got to say, brother?
Brother, look, it's an amazing time to be around football, especially the PSL. The derby always brings a lot of a lot of eyes to the screens, a lot of people's attention, and for people like us who are the lovers of the game, I mean, it's the perfect opportunity for us to chip in with our own opinions on what we think should be or shouldn't be when it comes to the derby.
Now, I can't start the show without asking you about your beloved Kaizer Chiefs and how they've performed this season. And this is not a jab at you, it's purely just looking at the season, looking at the challenges, looking at the positives if there are any. How do you sum it up until this very point?
I think it's been a very difficult watch from a Kaizer Chiefs fan perspective, because you almost feel like Kaizer Chiefs has been stuck on first gear for most part of the season. And we've had glimpses of maybe what we could see as a resurgence of a certain type of playing style from Atazwani, but to be honest with you, the results haven't been coming his way. For someone who's had 20 games, he's only won 8 of those games, which is a meager 40% of the games in total that he's been able to garner victories. And I think what's probably the saddest thing about being a Kaizer Chiefs fan and observing the team is that there's no clear identity, which is something that has always been synonymous for Kaizer Chiefs teams. There's no clear star in that team. There's no clear playmaker. And as much as Benjamin has something like 7 goals this season so far, he still doesn't seem like a real out-and-out goal poacher, someone we can rely on for goals. And then to add more insult to injury, we've obviously had our problems with the goalkeeping department. We've had some inconsistencies there. And now lately, we're starting to see a very leaky centre-back pairing with the left footer, Uome, with Ungezane, or with the Gwendaika on the other side. And then we've swapped it now. We're trying Udube, and it always seems to have something wrong. And I think that's been our biggest Achilles heel. We're not creating enough. We're not creating enough big moments. And when we are, we're not finishing them. And when we get attacked, we seem vulnerable at the back. And that's basically been the sum of the tale for Atazwani so far in his tenure.
Yeah, you make some interesting points there. I mean, a lot of times you hear about, coaches and teams building championship potential winning teams. They speak about the importance of a spine. They speak about the importance of a centre-back pairing and only really changing that if you have to, and a goalkeeper who's going to be your clear number one. It seems like there's been so much chopping and changing there with regards to that. I mean, if Kuna's your captain, surely you got to back him through thick and thin. He's your number one. You go with him. If Peterson's your number one, he can't have a bad game and then he's out the team. It creates that level of uncertainty. Is Atazwani still finding his best team? And point number 2, has he been let down by the big players? Because for the first time in a long time, there's, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but there seems to be a consistent flow of young players coming into the Chiefs first team from the academy. Duba, you look at Zwane in the center of the park. Blom obviously has left to go to MLS, but he's a player that emerged the past few seasons. You look at youngsters like, who's the boy that plays left back? Mashiane is a player who's emerged over the past few seasons. And of course, the really exciting Shabalala. Do those players come into a team where the team's big players, the big earners, the people that should be carrying Chiefs on their shoulders, they don't perform? How can the youngsters come into that environment and be expected to perform? And will Kaizer Chiefs ever be consistent if that is the sort of dynamic that we have?
Look, let's call a spade a spade. I feel Billiat and Keegan Dolly have been a massive disappointment for Kaizer Chiefs. There might be factors that lead to that being the case, but if you look at the type of quality that they bring in and the type of pedigree that they are brought into the club to try and establish, they haven't seemed to have paid dividends. They haven't seemed to have repaid the investments in terms of what the club is spending on them in terms of salary-wise, in terms of their performances. Now, you and I have spoken in great length with things that make up team dynamics. It's not just a single player playing in a certain way or a single player shining on a particular day. It's a combination of factors. And I think within that space where you're struggling to find your spine, you're struggling to find a consistent 11, you do rely on players that have a particular class to carry you in certain moments, to sort of like to buy you time, Fiso, to have a bad day, but a bad day with a draw, or a not so good game, but you win 1-0, or you score early and you under a barrage of attacks, but you know that your centre backs or your goalkeeper is going to bail you out. And I think Atazwan, in terms of the luck department, hasn't had that, and that's purely down to his top players, his marquee signings not performing to expected levels. And again, it hasn't boded well for us to let go of arguably our best player, who arguably won the derby for us, the last derby, who was putting in a hell of a shift at defensive midfield. And you look at the type of pairings Uzwan has tried in that defensive midfield system or position, it hasn't seemed to gel well. We seem to start well in the games, and then we seem to taper down as the games go deeper into maybe the second half, or maybe in the later stages of the second half. And that's down to cohesion. That's down to dynamics. That's down to a team not gathering enough points consistently throughout the season. And the last game against Golden Arrows is a telltale sign of the troubles at Natural, and they're all out there for everyone to see. You can't build a championship winning side without consistency of some level. And I think those two players have let the team down, and no one else has seemed to put their hands up and say, listen, I'm ready for the job. And in a situation like that, like you mentioned, you then open the door for youngsters to see, hey, who's willing to take the opportunity to shine? And unfortunately, a Kaizer Chiefs of old would bring in or rope in a youngster in a stable environment where the youngster can shine and make mistakes without being called out, because the team is already stable. There are already other top players that can allow the youngster to be the youngster that he needs to be. And at this present moment, we have Yusuf Mart, you have other pairings that we've tried at central midfield, and they seem to just not be working the charm. Because when you win the ball in certain areas as a team like that, you need to be able to play it in the right spaces and turn over that position. They talk about transition, and those transitional moments are created by the ability to win the ball in certain areas and to pass it into the right channel, so to create goal-scoring moments. And Chiefs hasn't been able to do that. The other players, Siatemba Sitebe, who's also been playing in the two pairing of the CDM, and that it seems not to be working for the club, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's always tricky. I mean, there does seem to be at times, what's that saying that they say, you're putting square pegs into round holes, or whatever the case may be. Like, you see Asebo Ngezana at times playing at right back, and maybe that's to find that solidity in terms of Slanty maybe attacking a lot more on the left-hand side. But at times, when he gets into the attacking areas, he looks lost. And it just seems that there's a lot of tweaking, and maybe it's not quite he doesn't have the rub of the green, does Atazwani at the moment, because there has been times when, like you said, the Chiefs have played really good football and they've looked to go toe to toe. I thought they did quite well against Sundowns, but scoring, it's a massive problem. What do you think of Christian Sailia, the new signing? He seems very direct, powerful, quick. That check of the head tells me that you just think he's just another player.
He's just another player, my brother. And honestly, with all due respect to the dude, I've only seen him play a couple of games. I haven't had a chance to look at his past YouTube videos. And with all due respect to the Chief scouting department, I'm sure they've done their work on the boy. For me, he doesn't look like a striker. For me, he looks more of a winger type of a player. That robustness, the type of running, the type of mileage, even the stride pattern and the movement, the structure, the body structure when he's moving. It's telling me that he's more of a player who likes to play square of the game, or side on a game, and receive the ball side on and take on a defender and go down the line. I don't see him as being a straight up number 9, someone who can get goals for us, play with his back against the defense. And to prove my point, against Golden Arrows, he hardly touched the ball, man. How many touches did he have inside the box? Well, he could say it's because of supply, but good strikers put themselves in positions where they can receive the ball constantly. and he doesn't come across as that type of guy for me. And I think we've missed the trick when it comes to trying to plug the hole, as it were. And I think he's just going to turn out to be just another player, unfortunately. And I'm sorry to the Nkosi faithful, but I'm not convinced.
Yeah, I wonder if all Amakosi fans agree with you. I know that I was doing Was a Weekend last week, and just Atlanta was someone who spoke about him in terms of he was quite impressed by Sahili, and I can see why. And I think you've put it quite nicely in terms of the position perhaps he plays. And if you have a striker, if let's say Caleb puts in the numbers, he scores 15 goals for you in the season. If Asaile comes in and can score 5 to 7 goals or 5 to 10 goals, he would have played his part, you know. Is there a case where, yes, you need a proper number 9, but you also need guys that can chip in consistently with 5 goals, 4 goals in midfield and attacking midfield areas?
I think you can't have a situation where you have certain players chipping into scoring goals when the team is not consistently creating chances in and around the 18-yard area. And I feel, and I haven't looked at the stats, but I feel the chance creation rate of a team like Kaizer Chiefs is way below par. And in a situation where you have midfielders or wingers chipping in or defenders chipping in from set pieces when it comes to goal scoring, it's a team that's consistently creating big chances throughout the game, from the start of the game all the way to the dying embers of the game. And I feel like a team like Kaizer Chiefs is not that type of team that's creating a barrage of chances to allow players to get opportunities to score. We already have a drought of goals in the country. We are already struggling with a striker that will outright score 20 goals a season or even 15 goals a season. And that says a lot maybe about the amount of games that the teams are playing, maybe the quality of the games or the quality of the opposition that the teams are against. But it also says a lot about the quality of the players in certain positions. And it's not just about putting a player in a system and hoping that it will work. I feel like Chiefs needs to get certain types of players into the club in order for them to perform in a certain way. They are not creating big goal scoring opportunities because they don't have players that create those big scoring opportunities. You look at our current, front four, Dupree, Dolly, Shabalala, maybe Benjamin, or even the striker we're talking about now. These guys are more mobile. No one is slowing the game down and making us play. Everyone is always receiving the ball in transition, or half a step too fast or half a step too slowly. No one is pinning the game down and saying, listen, let's play. I've seen Udoli making signs during games and saying, guys, let's play. But even he himself has been guilty of not allowing us to play the way we are supposed to be playing, because he either receives the ball wide as an inverted winger. He has to shift his body position. He doesn't have the pace to go past the fullback. He has to come back and drift inside. He's always caught short in terms of numbers when he does have the ball. So all of those factors, Fiso, for me, don't convince me that buying a Sayele would be able to solve our goal-scoring problems or even allow other players to chip it in the goal-scoring department, because the team as a whole is not creating enough big chances.
Kwanzima madoda.
Tough,
Kwanzima. You know, and the irony is that, you know, sometimes if I shift my attention to Orlando Pirates now, I mean, the irony is that a lot of times, you know, people will talk about, this team is on a good streak at the moment and whatnot. But when you look at the numbers, you think, well, it's still not good enough. You know, no matter how you cut it, slice it, or dice it. And then when you look at recruitment, a lot of people say that Pirates, they recruit a lot better than most teams. But the consistency is not there. You know, and I also look at the team sometimes and I think to myself, are they brave enough at times? You know, I've seen the team go into matches they should be winning with 3 center backs. And you're thinking, do you need 3 center backs plus 2 sixes? Really? You know, Dion Hotto playing wing back, are you getting the best out of him? You know, those sort of things where you sit there and you scratch your head and you're like, what's cutting here? You know, so from a Pirates point of view, yes, they ticked a few boxes in the last few games. And many will say that they are the better team going into this derby in terms of those results. But we know a derby, all of that goes out the window.
No, for sure. But look, let's give Pirates props. Personally, I think I've shared this with you before. I love Ndlondo. Yo. I think Ndlondo is a player for the big occasion. You know, I would have loved him to come to Chiefs. He, for me, for a person who's so diminutive in stature, he just has such a big heart. You can see that he wants to play the game like it's supposed to. You can see how he wants to express himself and impose himself on the game. There's something he does, Fiso, when he receives the ball. Because he has such a low sense of gravity, there's something he does when he receives the ball. He sort of moves as if he's going to the right, then he comes back as if he's going to the left, but the ball is sticking to his foot. Then he makes a 360 and then he turns, and then the game just opens up. But in a derby, you need a player like that. South African football DNA, you need a player also. You know what I mean? Even if chips are down and Pirates create a lot of chances and they miss a lot of chances. But you know, when Ngcobo gets onto the ball, we in, you know? And what I like when they play Ngcobo and Tim, or maybe Ngcobo and Cash Makaola, if he does get to start in the derby, what I do like about them is that the Pirates, for some strange reason, as much as they do play with a 3 center back, they can leave Miguel Tim on his own to anchor in front of the back three and allow Ngcobo to play. You know, he will team up with Usaleng, with Uzukamanja, with Lochi, and he can get up the field, and he doesn't have to come back and have the burden of responsibility of being defensive all the time. And he can allow, well, basically they have a back five. Let's put it that way, because you have Ushandu on the right and you have Uhota on the left, who then form part of the attack when going forward. So it sort of gives them a question when they all go, then Utim stays, then they become like a back four-ish with Utim sweeping in front of them. Then it allows Ngcobo to express himself. I love that player. I think it's going to be very crucial in the derby.
And I mean, when I was at the game the other day, I happened to be out at the Marisburg United game, and it seemed like they went with the back four with Morgi as well as Mayela in the middle, and then they had Marco on the left, and they went with Shandu on the right, and then I think Monyane came on for the second half. I looked at that, I'm like, okay, cool. They're mixing it up a little bit. I think a system like that allowed a player like Ngcobo to be able to express himself. Like you said, you know, I've always felt that when you play against a team when you have better players, you got to be brave enough to go toe to toe and say, you know what, we're the better team here. Let's be brave. Let's not be afraid to lose. I think that's a mentality that sometimes hinders some of our teams. You know, the being afraid to lose. Saleng, no doubt, there'll be a major focus on him in the derby. But the derby is a different game, you know, with regards to, I guess, what players bring to the table. You know, when you think as a fan, as someone who's watched the game for a long time, when you think of a derby, what do you think a player needs in a derby to make sure that they're the shining star?
For me, when you say derby, the first name that comes to my mind is Dr. Kumar. The other name that comes to mind is Jabu Paul. The other name that comes to mind is Collins Mbesu. The other name that comes to mind is Knowledge Musson.
Where are the Pirates names? Where are the Pirates names? Why are you one-sided here?
No, but I'm talking about Chiefs. I'm still coming to Pirates.
Oh no, because this list is long now. I'm thinking, where's the
Okay, let's go to Pirates. Lelompele, Benedict Sto Villagaz, Steve Lecole,
Little Napoleon. Little Napoleon.
Little Napoleon. You know, these names come to, and the real Donna Tekomodis. And I know he says he played his best football at Sundowns. No ways. Tekomodise at Pirates at his best was a marvel to watch. You knew what you were going there for the derby. And the bold and the beautiful, as the top striker there, Leslie Manyatel, Jerry Kosana, if you want to go even back. For me, those are type of players that when you thought of the derby, they sort of like watered your taste bud. They made you were salivating, man. You wanted to be there. You wanted to watch the game. And you know that those players will step up. Maybe to answer your question directly, to be a player in the derby, you have to have what we used to call growing up big match temperament. And big match temperament comes with trusting your ability as a player to perform what you can do. within the structure in terms of the tactical discipline and the instructions of the coach and how you've planned to try and outsmart the team. But most importantly, what big coaches always say is that big players win you big matches because those moments are uncoachable. When you're in a moment where you have an opportunity to go left or go right and you decide to not do any of them and lob the ball over, that turns you into a star. And you have to be brave enough to be able to do that in a system that allows you to make mistakes, that is not afraid for you to make mistakes, because we will win the ball and give it back to you to do that again. And I feel like a player from a Chiefs perspective, like a Shabalala, tries, but I feel like he's doing a bit more running with the ball than he's supposed to be slowing down. And I feel a player like a Saleng and a Ndondo and even a Lord, who always comes up trumps in a derby, will be able to do that because they are able to just pick those top moments when it comes to the derby. So for me, you need that player with that Genesis squad, that verve, that spice to be able to be top in a derby.
If I was to pick a word to describe that sort of player, you need a player with character. You know, it's one thing to have ability. Character just elevates you in those big moments. You know, and I remember a good friend of mine, Jimmy Dow. I asked him, you know, it wasn't derby related specifically. I asked him who was the best player he's ever played with, and he gave me two names. He said Jabu Pule, or Jabu Mahlangu as he's known today, and he said Gift Lerem. And he said the reason for that is that those guys, when it got hot in the kitchen, they demanded the ball. When that guy was on his back, he said, I'm alone. Trust me. Give me the ball. You know, those are the sort of people you talk about where when you speak of derby, they don't hide. They're not trying to not make mistakes. They are going to take the game by the scruff of the neck. Oh, when you marking me? Okay, sharp. We'll see. We'll see if you can mark me. That sort of thing that with people, some people frown upon. They say it's arrogant or whatever. Those are the people. Those are the players that take the game by the scruff of the neck, because those people are not thinking about the mistakes. That 90,000, their game's going up. It's not going down. You know.
Sure.
Do we still have those players in the game, you know, that can take the game by the scruff of the neck and say,
on paper, we do. From a Chiefs perspective, on paper, when you look at the team, maybe the starting 11, maybe not so much the bench. And again, we've got a long injury list now. Maybe on paper, the first 11, you would think, hey, Keegan Dolly on his best day. But let's be honest, so we've been waiting for that best day for over a season. You know, it's not coming. I don't think it's going to come. You would think a Keegan Dolly, someone with experience of playing big CAF Champions League matches with Sundowns, is playing in the top division in France, he would have that ability to say, let's ball, you know? But even he can't seem to be that glue that sort of puts everything together. And on the contrary, I feel like Pirates has more of those players than Chiefs does. I feel like a Lodge would be a guy who would say, give me the ball. I feel like a Saleng would be a guy who would say, give me the ball. I feel like Ndlondo is going to be asking for the ball. Best believe.
Look, if Ndlondo does anything, you're going to be the first person I'm going to call, because clearly
Dude, Ndlondo will win the derby. Let me tell you, Wuti, the difference between Chiefs and Pirates in the last derby. It wasn't that 66-yard strike by Yusuf Mart, that lucky once in a million shot that won us the derby. What won us the derby last time was heart. What won us the derby last time was Uplom. Let's be honest. Uplom was putting in a double shift, Babo, no pay. Uplom was doing his job and other people's jobs at the same time. Uplom on his own, maybe a little bit with his Fiso on the left, he completely outmarked Saleng. You know that you're having a good game when the guy who was picked to play as an inverted winger on the right changes flanks and goes to the other side. You've done your job. You know, he went on the other side. Keep it in completely. And that gives us a fighting chance. Us now on Saturday. Maybe he's a baller on Saturday. He won't, you know, because again, we go back to the character. And I feel like if Pirates doesn't take this opportunity to win the derby on Saturday, there's going to be a lot of heads that are going to turn in that camp. But I think this is the best chance that Pirates has to stake their claim in this derby. I think the Chiefs is at the most vulnerable. And purely because for the first time in the history of Kaizer Chiefs, the management has come out. And I know they've come out in the past, but they've come out and they've backed out to say whatever happens, his job is safe. You know? And to go into a derby with no pressure per se, for me in itself tells you, Wuti, maybe we are dealing with a different Kaizer Chiefs. And let's probably see Ngcobo as Kaizer Chiefs supporters and wait maybe for another generation of Chief stars. What about right now? I don't think we're going to get there.
Yeah, man. I mean, yeah, you know, I had goosebumps, you know, when we were speaking a little bit earlier about you know, derbies of the past. You know, when you mentioned some of the names that you mentioned, you know, so for me, I just want to cast our minds back, you know, as young men watching the derby, you know, some of your fond memories, you know, when you started to watch the derby. I mean, I think about it all the time. You know, I remember I support Pirates, strangely enough, not because of family allegiance. It was I'd go visit a friend of mine, his family was massive Pirates fans, and we'd go and hang out there. And then when there was Pirates games, they'd be watching. And I remember back in those days, you know, Gavin Lanes, you know, players who, I mean, Brendan Silent,
Silent, yeah,
Williams Okpara was a massive hero for me. I loved Williams Okpara. Legs of Thunder. I mean, we can't speak about Pirates without, or the derby and not speak about him. And another player that I used to love, Hellman, Midnight Express, and Kelele.
Coach by coach.
Hey,
Shout out to the coach.
And lastly, you know, a player who I used to love was Dumisa Ngcobo. Those strikes from range, could hit a ball, had flair. He used to have those earrings, or that tape around the ears. There was just a different thing about that era of football. I mean, Iwi Isa on the jersey. Man, I mean, for me, that was when I kind of fell in love with African football.
You can't talk about the derby. You can't talk. Sorry to interject. You can't talk about the derby without talking about Tabang Lebes, Frank Makugwa.
Yeah, do you remember that? Do you remember that celebration of Tabang Lebes? Yo, that's
no,
that's when you like, hey, this guy has dealt with you. Yo, what's the Michicha boy? Lifa Kosha.
Lifa, big names, my brother. Big names.
Yo, Spider-Man Baloy. Hey, Spider-Man Baloy. Hey, what's okay?
No, you know what I mean? That's what we grew up and thought of the derby as. And you knew, okay, when they like launched a new star, he's coming into that. You know, he's coming into that. And you would find, if you saw within that, those two teams had maybe had 1 or 2 trophies in the bag already within that derby season. They're going in there, they're favorites, they're fighting for the title, they're in the top 3. One of them is in the Champions League, one of them is in the CAF Confederations Cup, and the older version of the CAF Confederations Cup. And most of them were littering the Bafana squad. It was a mess, bro, a beautiful mess. You know, now how many Chiefs players are in that Bafana team? How many players could you pick there and say, listen, I'm going to war with you? And I'm not saying, these are real individuals. These are human beings. You and I will probably come across these people one day. And it's not trying to better their character as human beings, but we're looking at the bigger scheme of things. And of course, as consumers, as fans, we look at the game as entertainment, and we look at them as artists who perform on that stage. And for me, I feel we've been deprived for far too long of good quality derby football. And I hope that this coming weekend we'll see a different picture.
Yeah, I know. It's going to be exciting. And head on the block for you. No, I'll come back to that. Yeah, I don't want to quite wrap it up yet, because I want to ask you one last thing. I didn't send this as part of the notes, so I'm catching you a little bit off guard. I have an idea of what your answer might be, but I want to know from you, who is your ultimate derby, Soweto derby player? Who for you has been the most exciting player that you've ever watched in the derby, and why?
I think it's Dr. Kumalo. So I'm sorry, brother. I would have loved to mention someone in the later years. Now,
I'm not. The reason why I asked you, and I knew your answer, but I was asking you anyway. you know?
I think pound for pound, and obviously we didn't live through the teenage Dladla and the Esintwelengo and the Jomosono era and the Professor Ngubane era. For me, pound for pound, and look, anyone can argue and under the comment section or wherever about the statement. I don't think South African football has ever created a bigger superstar than Dr. Kumalo. Many, and by many, I'm talking about millions of people supported Kaizer Chiefs because of that one human being. He would do things with the ball. I mean, when I grew up in Fiso, it wasn't, I had no choice but to support Chiefs because like I support the Chiefs. But there are certain things, the way Buga and Amu in Dwana when you're growing up, what do I really like? Ubaba once said to me, hey, unomuntu to Dr. Kuma. Akazi aishwebe a penalty. I'm like, who is that person? Auntie, he received the ball in the air with two midfielders marking it. When Zangatu head Angala, and I'm like, I have to see that for myself. And best believe I lived through a moment where I saw that with my own eyes. And for me, you knew, hey, Dr. Kumalo in the derby, Simnandi, Simnandi. Much of the history, if you look at the head-to-head tale versus Pirates versus Chiefs, obviously the majority of the games were played yesteryear. But even the games in the 90s where Dr. Kumalo was there, I can't remember many of those derbies going opposite side when he was on the field. And he is the derby, he is Kaizer Chiefs. And I think it would be amiss of me to not give him his flowers. What a gent, what a superstar, what a footballer.
Yeah, I mean, Doris is that's a different beast. That I remember seeing a clip of Samuel Eto'o saying, when they were asking him about great African players, and he said Dr. Kumalo, and he said, if Dr. Kumalo was Spanish, he would have been up for Ballon d'Or. That's how good he was, and though that was big praise from a global superstar, one of the best players to ever play the game, to say a South African player, Dr. Kumalo, was one of the best he's ever seen. So yeah, man, I guess shout out to Doctor. I don't have any arguments with regards to that statement. I mean, we've been treated to some incredible footballers in South Africa, but for me, despite the fact that he only played in Argentina and for Columbus Crew in the MLS, Dr. Kumalo, I think he's one of those global figures. I mean, those South African figures that will stand the test of time, And one of the great statements I've ever heard about Doctor is that, when we were young, there was three big names in South Africa. There was Nelson Mandela, Brenda Fassie, and Dr. Kumalo. Those were three names that when you spoke South Africa, when you spoke greatness, those are the three names that you often would hear. So I don't know if you'll ever get a chance to see or hear this clip, but Menzi has given you his flowers, and I think I'd like to give my flowers to the great Dr. Kumalo. What an incredible footballer, man. So yeah, I guess Doctor is the FisMaz Show's ultimate Soweto derby player. I wonder who yours is if you are listening or watching. Let us know in the comments with regards to that. But yeah, it's going to be fascinating. Menzi, I think to wrap up the show, we've got about 4 minutes left. How do you think the game will go? Where is it decided?
I think it's decided in the second half. I think it's going to be cagey in the first half. I think we go into halftime 0-0 draw. Bar any calamitous errors that might be made by any of the two sides. Personally, I think Saleng, Lodge, or Ndondlo decide the derby tomorrow for Pirates. I call it 1-0 to Pirates. I see a big goal. Maybe not from as far a distance as Yusuf Mart's goal, but I see a scorcher from outside the 18. I see combination play, I see a wall pass, and I see a scorcher. And I see someone taking off their jersey and running into the corner. And that person is wearing black and white, unfortunately, for me.
Ish. Yeah, look, we're not going to argue. I think it's going to be 2-0. I think 2-0 to Pirates. But the derby's a crazy game because we all know all you need is one moment, But in these situations, you gotta pick a winner. You gotta put your head on the block, as they call it. Yeah, man, it's been a beautiful show. Just reminiscing about the derby. And yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm sure you are too. I know your family will be draped in gold and black. I know your big brother Ulinda. He's always been a fanatic. Like, he's one of the most fanatical Kaizer Chiefs fans I know. I thought you fanatical. That guy he's a fan.
For sure.
Yeah, man. So yeah, all the best. May the best team win. I'm gonna be working on the derby. I'll be in studio. And yeah, looking forward to that. It's gonna be my first experience working in the derby. So yeah, it's gonna be brilliant. Yeah, shout out to everyone. Make sure that you're watching Was a Weekend, Friday night at 6:30. We'll have a derby special. Our two guests will be looking at their greatest Kaizer Chiefs and Orlando Pirates team that they've played in with regards to the personnel. And we'll also be looking at their greatest opponents with regards to the opposite teams. So that's going to be fascinating. Look out for some really cool additions to the show. And yeah, man, hopefully one day we'll get Menzi on Was a Weekend. Yeah, who knows? He might be making an appearance even in the derby. I've got something up my sleeve. But nonetheless, we'll be looking forward to that. Yeah, it's going to be fascinating. Thank you, Menzi, for joining me once again. The FisMaz Show is back, baby. And we're back in style. Out.